Wonderful, wonderful guest today. What I really love about Hangin is we are all over the map, right? We're just whatever's fun and who's interesting. And there's so many incredible professionals out there today. And you're going to meet one of the most incredible. It's just really so fun. If you have not heard Amy Turk yet, you will hear it today and it will blow your mind. So, and Rob and I were saying, we always kind of talk a little bit before we start about what we're going to talk about. And we thought a good thing to talk about today is keeping you interested or keeping you motivated in the summer. Is that an issue for anybody? Do you know, just in general? No, Pam, you're always motivated.
Always
um,
motivated and practicing. But even
yeah.
even along with motivation, almost kind of like doing something different. And even if it's just one different thing, like picking one different thing. The summertime traditionally for us always gave us well, I just did harp. And so it always gave me time to just kind of focus and do things. But now I find that if I can add one different thing or have one goal, okay, this summer I will learn how to tap on the offbeat when I'm playing and not mess up. Just one thing, because sometimes I think our projects, or at least my projects, are too big. So even with the discussion we have today, if there's one thing that Amy might show you or tell you, and you say, you know what, I'm going to try that one thing and see how that works for me, because that would enhance what you already do rather than trying to turn into Amy Turk. I tried. Doesn't work. Especially if you're over a certain age, folks. Let me tell you what it feels like when you start trying to slap and dap and do all that.
Well, and I'm going to tell you part of the reason that Robin probably tried was, and we talked about Amy. She knows we're going to say this, but Amy makes the rest of us look bad. Like brides go online and they see Amy doing all this incredible stuff, and they're like, "Can you play such and such?" I saw, and as soon as you see Amy Turk's name, you really just want to write back. I mean, I don't because I'm a professional, but you write it right back. Why don't you contact Amy and ask her if she can play your wedding and what her charge will be?
And
She is a
what,
world famous harpist.
right, without saying what the charge would be, but I do tell them, I say, here, I can give you Amy Turk's contact information. I do say that. I will say that. And it's okay. I'm not mad at her. I'm not mad at her. I could listen to Africa, forever, forever, forever.
That's that's my
And
favorite too. I
that's your
love it.
favorite. Oh my gosh, the notation.
I
The
love that.
notation on it, guys. It's worth buying it just to see the notation and then pick a couple of things that you can do. But it's such an awesome time when the weather gets nice and you're spending more time kind of outdoors and you're just a little freer, even when our jobs stay the same. Some of us work 12 months doing the same thing, but you still kind of feel a little more vacationish when, of course, I'm more talking about the East Coast because you California people, I don't know how you tell season from season and what you do over there. I'm like, I can't live here. It's too pretty every day. Every.
I think too, sometimes a lot of us that have done a lot of teaching, or even all of us that have been students, your body is almost wired in June to be like, yay, until September. But I think Robin has a really good plan to just find one thing and maybe find one thing today. And even if you don't necessarily play pop or any kind of that music, you can still add some of this to what you're playing and make it really, really interesting. I know I was also saying to Robin, because motivation for me in the summer generally is more of a challenge for sure. But I went to the library today. Just a little side note here: if you haven't read The Correspondent, it's one of the best books I've read in a very long time. But I went back to get another book, and they have an adult book reading club. And if you read 5 books, you get a free mug. I promised Katie I would not do this through the Harp Center because you will not get a free mug. But if you challenge yourself, or those of you that have heart buddies, challenge your buddies to learn 5 new songs by the end of the summer and then go out for wine and cheese or something. But, just kind of a different kind of motivation. I,
And
I
as
know.
you think, go on. Sorry.
No, no, no. What were you saying, Robin? Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to tell everybody, as you're thinking of what this one thing you're going to do this summer is going to be, or this one difference, or this one challenge, write it in the chat. Put it down.
Yeah, see,
I'm
that
going to learn such and such, or I'm going to, finally finish this piece that I've been trying to play, or I'm going to throw out this piece and start a new one because I've been on this piece for 6 years and it sounds the same, you know? And there's lots of conferences and all sorts of things. I hope you guys are coming. I hope I see a lot of you in Tennessee and then in New Jersey. But Christina, what's going on in Canada?
Yeah, there's a lot of really exciting stuff happening this summer at the One World Harp Congress. So I'm sure, I mean, if you were here last month, you heard us talking about it. We had Rachel Brandwine on, and she had so many wonderful things to say about this conference. And we're going to have Amy talk about her presentation a little bit also. She's also presenting, but Lynn Asmus is one of the main coordinators of this conference in Toronto this summer, and we all know and love Lynn. And she, yes, thank you, Katie, for putting that up in the chat. The link to the One World Harp Congress. She sent me a little note to share with you all of the exciting things that are happening. So I'm just going to read what she sent to me because I think that it really tells a lot about all of the all of the excitement. I'm really excited. I'm personally going. My husband and I are both going. It's my first World Harp Congress. It's nice that it's so close to home. So this is what Lynn says. So 300 plus presenters, 46 ensembles, 31 exhibitors, and over 200 sessions, including harpists, orchestral musicians, chamber players, vocalists, dancers, narrators, composers, pianists, one aerialist, and one full musical production by Rave Harp Singapore. Performances range from the known to the entirely unexpected, from current compositional trends to world music traditions that are over thousands of years old. 5 full days and 2 half days of eye-popping talent, creativity, training, and study. There will be a Canadian music feature. Composer in residence is Caroline Lizotte. If you don't know much about Caroline Lizotte, she's incredible. Her music is incredible, just really great. There's going to be two orchestral concerto concerts that during that 5 day span or 7 day span. Some of just the most incredible playing in the entire world is going to be happening in Toronto this summer. And it's also in Toronto. If you've never been, Toronto is a beautiful city. There's lots to do. There's going to be one evening where the CN Tower is going to be all lit up, celebrating the One World Harp Congress. It's just going to be a really fun opportunity to connect with friends, with colleagues. That's my favorite thing about these conferences, whether it's one of our conferences or the World Harp Congress, is you get to reconnect with people that you've known for a long time and you maybe don't get to see very often, or people that you've only known online. So it's going to be great. So of course we're going to get like a formal introduction of Amy in a bit, but I just wanted to ask you, Amy, tell me a little bit about your presentation at the One World at the Congress this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my presentation is presenting my original solo music for harp, featuring my percussion techniques and a few of my favourite pop covers that I've produced along the way as well. I've sort of designed the program to be a narrative story that takes you through how I came to begin playing percussion on the harp, where that came from, what my influences were. And then I'm going to finish by playing the entirety of my debut EP, which is called Syzygy, in full, as a rounding off of the concert at the end, the culmination of my journey.
I think that's so cool. Like I just love the if you have the opportunity to go on the website, I highly encourage you to do so. The variety of things that you will get to see and hear at this conference, it's just unparalleled. Truly, if you have the opportunity and the means to go, I highly recommend. Plus, you'll get to see me there, and that would be fun. So, Robin, are you going to the Congress this summer?
Yes, yes, yes. I will be there. And so I really, really hope that a lot of you are there. I'll be there with the idea committee. And so I will be there right when you come in with lots of silly things to give you. And I mean, you should come. I'm excited because I'm going and not really doing much. So I'm going to be attending and learning and just really honing in on any skills I have or don't have. I'm very excited. Conferences
Same.
is what I love. So yeah.
Yeah. Just attending. Very excited to just attend.
Right, low key, low key. And so with Amy, Amy, I mean, you've got her bio, you can read it. She studied at the Royal Academy of Music in London and all of this. Her credentials, the way I knew her credentials were amazing is because I was first introduced to her when I saw all the percussive and the fun pieces she plays, because of course, that's what my students bring to me. But then she turns around and sits and plays Bach like you wouldn't believe. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. That's the same. That's the same. That's kind of not fair. That's the same person and she can do all that. I was like, what? What? I want you to know she has a Patreon channel. And so that's one of the ways to really support our musicians and also to really be in the know, to get some of their secret arrangements that aren't public yet, to get some of their concerts. She does private coachings, she does lots of workshops. So, really, I would encourage you to go to her website and contact her. The harp world, I think, is different than so many others, that you can really have access to our top people. So please get there, sign up for some coaching so she can work with specifically what you need and want. MJ has some trivia for you.
Trivia before Amy gets started, and this is a little bit open, so we'll take the first answer that has a little bit of truth to it. We would like to know, name one of the most prominent or famous harp solos in a rock and roll piece. I, of course, went way back to the 60s, but you don't have to go back that far, right, Lisa? There are other ones. So put it in, and the first one, of course, it comes up with the one of the correct answers gets a mug. And without further ado, Amy, we're so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Amy, as you go into your presentation, will you just tell us a little bit about how you first kind of got into this world that you live in? How did you become Amy Turk as we know you now, your percussion life? Tell us a little bit about that, and then go ahead and launch into your presentation.
Sure. Okay. On the subject of being Amy Turk, I would encourage all of you to absolutely be yourselves at every point, and I think that is really why I am doing the things that I do now, is because I came into the harp world just really desperately wanting to play the harp. I wanted to play the harp when I was 6, and it was my first instrument. And I don't even know what drew me to it. I think it was hearing it. Honestly, I think it was hearing it in Disney movies. I remember loving things, in the Disney Renaissance, like Beauty and the Beast, and just hearing the wonderful harp parts that Alan Menken wrote in his scores. The Nightmare Before Christmas was big for me as well, as a child, thinking about orchestral harp and film scores. And I think there was just something about the quality that the harp brought to orchestral music in those kind of musical settings that just really fired my imagination. And so I begged my parents to let me learn the harp. And I just felt so fired up by the act of playing the harp. But what was interesting for me, and what took me a long time to figure out, is exactly what type of music was going to make me really happy playing the harp. And I learned so much from classical music, and I love classical music because I grew up with it, and I shared a lot of that with my mum, who plays piano and now is learning the harp as well. It was a big part of my classical harp journey. But I found when I was a teenager that playing classical music just really wasn't making me happy, and I was feeling the pressure of trying to play perfectly, and it just kind of wasn't really working out for me. And because I grew up in a household where there was always music playing, we always had music going in the car if we were going to visit relatives or wherever we were going, I had really diverse musical interests right from the beginning. I was inspired by, like I said, by film scores. I listened to a lot of video game music. I had my first games console when I was 4, and so I was listening to a lot of really great music from that very early era of video games. And also listening to a lot of rock music, a lot of rock and prog from the 70s and 80s. I loved Genesis and Phil Collins and Led Zeppelin and Queen and all the stuff that my parents loved and were listening to, and Dire Straits, of course. And so I had all of this different kind of music just swirling around in my head. And so somewhere along the way, it kind of just made sense to me that I needed to play the music that was really in my heart, and that it wasn't necessarily all classical music. And that's really what led me into arranging, is the fact that when I was growing up, when I was a teenager and I was first trying to arrange things, I remember wanting to arrange the theme song to an anime which I really liked at the time when I was 12 or 13 years old, and there just being no sheet music available, not even on the internet, because of course that was hardly a thing then either. And so the only way that I was able to play the music that was really firing me up at the time was in that very first instance when I was about 13 years old. What would that have been? 2002. Was to sit down at the piano in the living room, my mum's piano, and put a CD in CD player. And play the track that I wanted to transcribe, and I just got manuscript paper out, and there I was with a pencil with my manuscript paper, leaning up against the piano desk, just pressing play and pressing pause, and trying to figure it out from scratch, and it's just sort of all went from there, really. But so much of the music that I really wanted to play all throughout that time, and well into my career when I graduated and I was playing at weddings full time and all of that stuff, that was all stuff where I had to transcribe the sheet music by ear and make the arrangements myself, because you couldn't buy them. They didn't exist. And when they did start to exist, you know, thinking about things like easy piano arrangements, I couldn't afford them because I was a student, and I was just, you know, trying to save all my money, save up and pay off my student loan and things. So I really just fell into this world of transcribing stuff by ear and trying to make sense of how I could make this instrument that I loved playing, and being around, make friends with the music that I loved the most, and kind of try and get those two things to meet in the middle. So that's your answer. I could go on about that in much more detail, but I know that you're all here to hear me talk about how to arrange pop for the harp, and also to talk a little bit more about how rhythm and percussion factor into my methodology. So thank you very much, everyone, by the way, for my lovely introduction, and thank you everyone for coming to hang out this afternoon. So, as I've been saying, I specialise in playing the harp percussively and playing in modern styles, and I've been arranging pop and rock songs for the harp for over 20 years now, which is kind of, when I wrote this down on my sort of list of prompts here that I'm just checking every now and then, I was quite shocked that it's been that long, but it has. So I started transcribing music, as I said, by ear from an early age, and this is central. Transcription is central to my method for arranging. So my approach always starts with listening. I'm going to talk about listening and picking out different bits of the arrangement quite a lot as we go through my notes on arranging pop. So I use a mixture of transcription by ear and scoring, and I use Sibelius, but obviously there are lots of scoring softwares available. But that's how I produce my arrangements, and so I do the transcription sat at the computer, and then I come and sit at the harp and I produce a working score, and I usually have to play test maybe 2 or 3 versions of my score before I get to a final version of an arrangement. And so I've experimented with percussion and extended effects quite a lot through my career as an arranger and composer, and I believe that rhythm is central to bringing pop songs alive. Particularly thinking about this context of trying to get all the details into a solo harp arrangement, which is a particularly interesting challenge to me, but sometimes a very challenging challenge. And I think that having more effects, including drums and percussion in your toolkit, can just be a really fun way to recreate pop songs more faithfully, and have as much fun as possible doing it. And I also kind of want to highlight the fact that obviously because I've had this background of listening to a lot of different styles of music and being really invested in a lot of different styles of popular music across the whole of my lifetime, I really feel that listening is the number one thing that really gets you to understand the language of a genre, because it really engages your instincts, you know, what things about the rhythm or the melodies or whichever part of the arrangement you're listening to, what parts of your song are really kind of telling you that it's in that style, and you know, what things can you cherry pick out that you can kind of bring to the harp in a meaningful way. So, speaking of listening and transcription, my first kind of tip for arranging pop for the harp is that you must listen to the original version of the song that you're wishing to arrange, and I think you should listen to it a lot. This is always what I start with. Anytime I'm arranging something new, I want to just get inside the music and listen to the source material as much as possible to try and understand everything that it is in that original context. Because what I do when I'm arranging is I'm trying to kind of clarify all of that information, boil it all down into a very concentrated form, so that you can find the priorities of what makes that song sound the way it does, what things are most important to your ears, and try and get those bits onto the harp in the clearest, kind of most concise way possible, so that it's possible to do with just two hands. So you want to try and understand the fundamental things about the song before you start thinking about how it will work for the harp. And this is just, you know, your basic list, fundamental things like instruments used, the structure of the song, interesting shapes in the melody line, repeating shapes in the melody line, these sorts of things. And of course, you can use piano or piano vocal chords score to get started, or you can work purely by ear. You can also do a hybrid. You know, it's whatever you're comfortable with. Is great in this context. But I always say to people who haven't tried transcribing, transcribing by ear is always trial and error, so it's not something to be afraid of. It's more something to just have curiosity about and just sort of see what you can hear and see what patterns you can kind of identify. And I find that I understand music differently once I've done the listening and I've done the transcription and I'm looking at it in score and I'm seeing the patterns and I'm also hearing it back again. It starts to become a different thing that I understand more deeply and in different ways. So you're learning so much from going through that process as well. So you're listening to the song, you want to try and identify all the elements of the song that are there. So usually with a pop song, you're going to have your vocal line, you're going to have accompanying instruments, you're going to have a bass line, and then you're going to have drum and or percussion parts. And you want to ask yourself, what stands out? Which parts do I think should take the greatest priority in my arrangement? So then you want to start asking yourself, what techniques could you employ to recreate the original elements that stand out most from the original track? Say, for example, you have a synth melody line. Sometimes in pop songs, when we have melody lines that aren't vocal, it's often called a hook if it's something that comes around lots of times. And a hook can be a really useful thing to kind of like pepper in between your main bits of vocal melody. But say, for example, if you've got a synth line and it sounds very kind of artificial in your original song, I often find things like this, you can set them apart from a vocal melody by doing something like playing that line as harmonics. So you've got little things like that you can start to think about straight away, just to set different parts apart from each other in a sort of a harp sound world. And then of course you can start thinking about, if there's a drum part, could you start to fit parts or all of that drum part around your pitched parts using percussive effects. So we want to identify the fundamentals of the song before we really get stuck in too much to getting excited about techniques. That's again, you're sort of like just covering all of the basics. What time signature is this song in? Where are the repeating riffs and hooks around the vocal melody? Think about distinctive rhythms, maybe something that you could fit into the accompaniment, something that repeats lots of times to get into the rhythmic language of that song. What tempo is this in? What might the key signature be? And of course, the more you start getting into the bass line, the easier it is to start understanding what the key signature might be. And you also want to identify the structure of the song. So normally when I'm transcribing, I'd actually just do the kind of basics, identifying tempo and time signature, and then I would just count out the bars while I was listening and just add them in Sibelius one bar at a time while I'm listening to the song, and then do your breaks so that you've got the right number of bars for each section, and then you can just label all the sections. Just make sure that you're putting in what you think the sections are: intro, verse 1, pre-chorus, chorus, and so on. And it just allows you to get a really good sense of the overall geography of the song. And then, of course, if you want to cut any sections, if you want to make it shorter for some reason, or say, for example, if you're arranging stuff for weddings, you might want to have a 1.5 minute version of a song. I've had to do this lots of times for brides going down the aisle, as we all have. And making sure that you have that overview of the song just makes it much easier to make really sensible decisions about which bit of the song, you know, where you're going to cut it off for that kind of purpose and that kind of thing. So it just gives you the confidence if you start with that overview. And then thinking about listening to this source material and trying to translate this in a meaningful way to the harp, you want to ask yourself, do I actually want to recreate the original feel of the song, and is it possible? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it might not seem so possible, or you might not be able to imagine how you could bring these elements into the harp in a way that's going to be authentic to the harp. So if it's not possible, if you feel that you've got that instinct that it's not quite going to work in that context that you hear it in the original, how could you reimagine it using the elements that stand out the most to you? And maybe could you give it a different feel, and make it your own? So I've got lots of arrangements that I've done where building a drum beat around the chords makes perfect sense, but I've arranged plenty of songs where it really doesn't make perfect sense. And so it's good to have a plan for when that happens, to kind of go, how can I bring the same kind of interesting rhythms and the same pace and the same rhythmic energy to something without actually literally adding the drum parts? So I've got my first case study here. I'm going to do a little bit of playing just to kind of demonstrate some of the things I'm talking about. So obviously the harp is so incredible at sustain, and I think there are lots of times when leaning into the harp's ability to sustain can be a really great way to compromise when it's not possible to kind of be more literal about your translation of a song into a harp arrangement. So this first example that I'm going to show you is a little bit of an arrangement that I did of Titanium by David Guetta. This was a request that I did years ago for a wedding, and then I played this lots of times at weddings because it's a really nice recognisable tune. Genres like EDM can be really difficult to bring authentically to acoustic harp because sonically they're so different. You know, they're very compressed. You don't have a lot of kind of dynamic variance in this genre. It's much more just about kind of building layers in the arrangement. But the drums are also very flat. A lot of the parts end up being very flat because it's so compressed, and so that makes it quite difficult to translate to acoustic harp, which of course is a very dynamic instrument, a very different context. So I've opted with this version of this song to produce more kind of like a chill out version of the song because it leans into the harp's ability to do this amazing sustain and have great dynamics. So you're creating space in the arrangement rather than trying to fit a drum beat in, but you're also allowing the arrangement to have the right momentum by focusing more on the vocal melody. So in Titanium, it's kind of interesting because all the sections have kind of different parts that some of which are very nice to translate to the harp, very easy to translate to the harp, but then other bits where it was kind of a bit more of a puzzle to work out how to do that. So of course you start with this. Got this arpeggiated part, which great, you know, it's a brilliant translation. That doesn't take much sort of sleuthing at all to go, how can I make this work on the harp? And of course that works quite well with the vocal melody in that first verse. That's all good, that's all well and good. But the problem is, when we get into the pre-chorus, that's when the build starts happening, and it's all very kind of, in an EDM context, that's where you get more percussion coming in, and that's where everything ramps up so that we get the drop for the chorus. So what I opted to do for this in that harp context is literally just, because it's one change of chord per bar, to just have the chords in the left hand, keep it nice and simple, and let the right hand do all the rhythm stuff. So I've got harmonic information in the right hand, and I've got my melody at the top. So from there you get this sense of it building without having to bust a gut doing, you know, too much stuff. And it's also, in a pre-chorus, you're still building. You want to make sure that everything builds to the chorus in a pop song. So if you give it away too soon, there's no more energy left to give, and then the arrangement doesn't make sense. So the only thing I did beyond that, because it's the same chord progression in the chorus, is just go into some arpeggios in the left hand, and then you've got your right hand doing a very similar thing in that melody from that point. So that's a nice compromise. That's a way that you can really keep the momentum and the energy going without having to get into percussion, because sometimes that works great, and sometimes it's not worth the energy. Of course, it's up to you to decide which one you're going to do. But creating space in the arrangement like this just leaves the right hand to be the star without making the arrangement too busy and leaving it flatter as a result. So in the PDFs that you've all got with my thoughts, I've got a bit of extra stuff here about transcription if you want to take a look at some more of my thoughts about how to work by ear. But I'm going to move on because I have so much to tell you and so little time. Just to have a few more, to give you a few more thoughts about chords and bass lines, and then things to think about with melodies before we get into harp drumming and thinking about some more kind of percussive techniques. So, chords and bass lines, things to consider. Bass lines can sometimes sound a bit more authentic if you're doing them PDLT or just low in the strings, but also it's a great option, and it's sort of a little bit more percussive as well to think about doing your bass line in a more stopped style. Most famous example I can give you from my own back catalogue is that bass line from Stand By Me. Because creating the shape by really being specific about the durations in that bass line is what gives it that character, compared to where you have all that wash of the low bass strings. So just clearing that up a bit. Although fussier and a little bit more effort on the fingers makes all the difference to kind of just bringing it closer to the original, the feel of the original song. So obviously you may need to find ways for your left hand to cover both a bass line and some chord harmonic information or a bit of a riff that's going on in the song. And you want to make sure that this works in a way that creates the feel of the style of your source material. So bass line, obviously you want to try and make sure that you're holding to the stresses on or possibly off main beats. And your chords are usually going to follow this, adding that extra harmony information. Riff can also be a great go-to between sections where the vocal melody has dropped out for a bit, because usually your vocal melody is going to take priority, but having a riff that kind of comes in between can give you something great to give you a transition between sections and show other interesting parts of the arrangement without you having to play that interesting part of the arrangement and the vocal melody all at the same time. So instead you have a sort of an alternating thing where you've got your vocal melody most of the time, and then in your bridge or in your sort of gaps you've got a moment where you can do this other instrumental part and show that off as well. Harmony notes, as with titanium, harmony notes might need to be added in the right hand underneath your melody or split between the hands. And long sustained chords, this is something which can go either way. Sometimes long sustained chords might leave a gap, particularly in your left hand in the arrangement, that disrupts the rhythmic feel of your arrangement. So you might want to fill in these gaps in an appropriate rhythmic way with additional harmony notes to keep things moving along. However, long sustained notes, as in titanium, can work really well in some contexts. So this is one of those ones where it's up to you to decide which approach is going to work best for the source material. And this is a different question altogether as well. If you're adding a drum beat on top of things, your chords can often be quite long and sustained and not have to do very much other than hold down beat one of the bar often. So a little bit about melodies in pop songs as well. So we're mostly talking here about 16th notes syncopation, sometimes 8th note syncopation as well. But if you're playing any kind of pop music, there's going to be lots of offbeats. So this is something to accept, just get used to, because it can feel really uncomfortable to begin with. But once you're feeling comfortable with it, I often describe this in workshops when I'm teaching as the difference between feeling like you're falling off a cliff and feeling like you're flying off a cliff. So thinking about being able to hold the beat, you know, if you're tapping the beat with your foot or something like that, and you're just kind of trying to be okay with the idea that your hands, maybe one or both of your hands might be on all the offbeats, and just to feel that you're floating over them is the kind of mindset that I've generally adopted, that makes me feel okay with offbeats, because they can be really fun, and it is the thing that makes pop songs sound really cool. That's the thing that makes all pop sound really exciting and cool and makes us want to dance to it a lot of the time, is the fact that you've got that contrast between the beat, usually that the drums are giving us, and all the offbeats that are happening in the vocal melodies, and sometimes in the riffs and little hooks and things that you've got in there. So ways that you can make melodies, vocal melodies in pop songs make a little bit more sense and be a little bit more digestible. You want to get to know the lyrics of the song that you're working on. And in the early days of doing this, I used to write the lyrics into my arrangements. My arrangement of Marry You by Bruno Mars, which I made a million years ago, my working copy of that I used to use all the time. I've got all the lyrics because it was so difficult to remember, even reading the music, what the rhythms were meant to be in each of the verses. That the quickest shorthand that I found was just seeing the words next to the rhythms. The better you know the lyrics, the easier the rhythms will be, in my experience, because it's just a really intuitive way to be thinking about the stresses and accents of the melody as it's sung, and a way to get you to notice which notes and words the singer is naturally accenting. This is a particular challenge nowadays for harpists playing pop music, harpists playing at weddings. If you're playing any Taylor Swift is really challenging for harp because her vocal melodies have a lot of repeated notes and quite a narrow range a lot of the time. And so thinking about stresses and accents is the way that you're going to be able to kind of bring that melody alive, rather than it being you playing the same note lots of times and not really being able to kind of feel it and get into a rhythm that's actually fun there. You can also think about if you've got the difference between a verse and a chorus when you've got a similar range of notes. Easy things that you can do, again thinking about that treatment that I gave to titanium, is using chords or doubling in octaves to highlight stresses or to give a little bit of extra oomph to a section, to just make the arrangement sound a bit bigger. That's quite an easy shorthand that you can do, which helps to naturally give the right stresses to the melody, so that it sounds like it does when it's being sung with words. Obviously, you can consider staccato, employing that to recreate stresses as well and make kind of contrast with more melismatic bits of vocal lines. That's quite an easy one to sort of reach for. And grace notes as well. I found over the years that grace notes in vocal melodies in pop are always pretty much on the beat. And that's just something where it's a different mindset to thinking about it from a classical point of view, where we think about the grace beat always being before the beat and your big note being on the beat. It's just not that way in pop music, despite the fact that you think about current pop stars like Ariana Grande, there's so much ornamentation in vocals like that. People like Charlie Puth as well. There's loads of kind of decoration on the vocals, but they all seem to have this kind of convention of doing grace notes on the beat. So shifting to that, if you're adding that kind of detail into a melody in an arrangement, can just really solidify it in that style. So yeah, if you're playing any kind of pop music, you're going to find loads of 16th note syncopation. Sometime, and actually I think looking at this, I think the PDF that you've got, I've used the English term semiquavers, so sorry about that. I've used 16th notes. I don't know why we use semiquavers, it's such a silly word, but there we go. So you've got lots of stuff in pop songs, like I said about Taylor Swift, where you've got notes that just repeat rapidly. And this is quite a challenge because it's just so flat doing it like that. So we need to be a bit creative to kind of get around that in a way where it's going to sound musical and it's going to be something that doesn't completely tire your hand out and also sound very boring. Obviously, if you've got the scope to do it, you can use enharmonic equivalents to have the same note happening on two different strings. You can always, if you're really having to go for it on one single note, to brace your thumb on the string above, those kinds of things. But if it's really not working, and this works a lot more than you might think, you can miss quite a lot of notes out and still get the same kind of sound, actually. If you're thinking about when you've got lots of repeated notes and you want to try and kind of get all of them in, which sometimes you might want to, you can also just think about using like crescendo or diminuendo to kind of give a greater sense of a journey through the line, and that can often soften that so that you're not just hearing the clack of your finger going back onto the string lots of times. So to give you a little example of this that works quite well, I have an ensemble arrangement which I've taught in quite a lot of workshops over the last few years of Bellyache by Billie Eilish, and the vocal melody in Bellyache is not a terrible example of repeated notes a lot of the time. It's got quite a nice sort of shape where it moves around quite a lot. But when you get to the very end of the chorus in Bellyache, this is where she does the title line where she says, "But now I've got a bellyache." And the problem with that is it's all on two notes. And it goes... It's really fast. And it sounds terrible. But the thing is, because you've got important stresses and then you've got lots of syllables just getting the words out, actually you don't need all of those notes in order to give it the same feel. So what I've ended up doing with this, in order to make it work on the harp, is to cut out all the unnecessary syllables, which gives you, I think it's "but now got bellyache," rather than all those extra syllables that you don't actually need. But obviously you do need if it's in words, but if it's just in letters, musical letters, you don't need it. So that ends up sounding like, which actually gives exactly the same effect when it's done nice and fast, but it just gets rid of all the extra effort that you might initially think you need to put into playing that melody on the harp, because you're just respecting the stresses and the accents that the words are kind of giving you. So there are lots of instances where that will do the job. And you really don't need to worry about having every single note that you get delivered when you've got all those syllables and all those words that you've got to do. So those are a few thoughts about pitched things that you might want to consider when arranging a pop song for the harp. And now let's talk about the main event, thinking about harp drumming. So this is a system that I've developed for myself. This is something that I've worked on, for about the best part of 20 years, coming up for 20 years. And I discovered some of these techniques initially through acoustic guitar. When I was a student and I first went to college, I kind of fell into that world quite by accident, really, and discovered that there's a lot of acoustic guitarists who are also doing, kind of percussive techniques, and they do pop arrangements where it's like a whole song played on one acoustic guitar, including the drums. And I looked at this and I thought, that's a, the guitar is a hollow wooden box, and I reckon I could do this on the harp. Maybe I should give it a try. So I noticed that they had these two kind of fundamental techniques that they were employing, because of course any pop song that you're going to hear pretty much is going to have a snare drum sound and a bass drum sound. The snare drum being your high pitched drum that sort of sits in the middle of the drum kit and gives you that very kind of sharp smacky sound, and a bass drum, which is the biggest drum in the drum kit, which is right in front of the drummer's right foot and gets played with a foot pedal. So you have these two sounds, and then you can get all kinds of foundational beats that you might hear in pop songs. Most of the time it's going to be something simple as a starting point, like bass drums on beat 1, snare drum on beat 2, 3, 4. You've got that back and forth. So I noticed, first of all, your snare drum sound. This is again something I've borrowed and kind of adapted from acoustic guitar. I just take my hand nice and flat, I keep my fingers together, I keep my arms in a kind of regular like harp playing position, and you're just smacking the soundboard with your fingers. I try and kind of land so that the edge of the soundboard is where the edge of my fingers are before they enter the palm. So that's your slap sound. That gives you your snare drums, and you can do it the same with both hands. In the left hand it's a little bit more horizontal, in the right hand you're a little bit more diagonal, just because of the offset of the harp to the right. But it's not too hard to do, and it's a lot of fun. So that's your snare drum sound. The bass drum sound, again, borrowed from those acoustic guitarists that I saw all that time ago. It's basically taking the heel of the palm, which is the squishy bit of the palm here before your hand becomes your wrist. Don't do this with your wrist. And you're just using your wrist itself as a hinge to push this bit of the heel of the palm into the body of the harp. I first tried this here on the soundboard by bringing my elbow all the way forward to make it point at the column, and that was just because the soundboard is the softest bit of wood that we have on the harp, and it seemed like it was going to be the bit that gave me the most noise. So I do it like this. But there came a time when I realised that I might want to do a bass drum sound with my right hand, because my left hand might need to do something in an arrangement. And so I've adapted this technique so that basically you're doing the same thing, but I'm doing it kind of with my arm a bit more like this, getting that same bit of the hand, and I'm just pushing it into the back of the body of the harp, like this. And that's much more, my arm is kind of just moving back and forth like this. So that's the way that I do it. You can do that same thing on this side of the harp. I've done that at times just to kind of get a different sound. But you can make a fist and use the squishy bit on the side of the hand here to make a bass drum sound as well. And that works up here. It works further down, where you can't see because my camera's not pointing at it. But this technique also works on the back of the harp. The thing I would say with any percussive action, but particularly with bass drum sounds, is that you want to just find a sweet spot that really makes a nice deep sound quite naturally. You don't want to be tapping it too hard. You don't actually need to tap any part of the harp really hard in order to make a good sound. It's more just about finding spots that give you an interesting sound that you like, and then you can do it firmly, but not with excessive force, and that makes it kind of sustainable so that you can do it across a whole song and for a long time without getting too tired out. And also in the early days, thinking about when I first arranged stuff like Africa, part of that was because I was trying to learn it really quickly because I got booked to play it for a wedding, but it was also just, you know, the excitement of trying to produce a new arrangement. If you get too excited and you do too many bass drum sounds too soon when you're new to it, you can bruise your wrists, and I have done that, and please don't do that. There's really no need to do it at all. You want to just kind of try and build this stuff in nice and slowly and just get to know just how gently you can tap it and still get a really nice sound, rather than going overboard and hurting yourself. It's totally not necessary, and I've done it so you don't have to. So thinking about arranging and adding bass drums into a tune, I just wanted to touch briefly on the fact that I think there is a hierarchy of bass drums and bass lines in arranging, and generally speaking, bass drums are great, but they're kind of an additional extra, and I believe that bass line should always take priority, especially if you've got a bass line, as it usually is giving you where your main beats are and where your main stresses are within the bar. And with changes of chords as well. Changes of chords and bass lines generally, I would say, are more important. And sometimes you can fit both in, but it's usually not necessary to fit both in, as the bass note gives you adequate bass information for the arrangement to sound convincing without there also needing to be a bass drum there. So I've got a couple of case studies to show you with this, just to give you an idea of what I mean. So one of my earliest arrangements that I did featuring like a drum part was this arrangement that I did of White Wedding by Billy Idol. And this arrangement is really, really simple. It's very fast, but it's just bass drums on 1, snare drum on 2, bass drum on 3, snare drum on 4, and you just go back and forth like that. And because this was very early days, this was before I used to do bass drums with my right hand, so it's all left hand. You're just going back and forth like this. So what I ended up doing with this was just missing out every time there's a new bass note, which is it starts off, it's 2 bars of the same bass note, and then you've got 1 chord per bar, and then it goes back and forth like that. So and the thing is, I think you'll agree, you don't really miss the bass drums on beat 1. Because actually you've got everything you need there already. You've got bass information, and then where you've got the note sustaining, because that chord isn't going to change until the next time beat 1 comes around, then you can have your bass drums in the gaps, and it gives it that nice decoration. So that's a bit of White Wedding. And then I've got this arrangement that I do quite a lot nowadays of Paradise by Coldplay. And so this one's interesting. What I'm going to play for you here is a bit of the first verse, which goes into the first chorus. The first chorus, you've got extra bass drums, but you've still got that kind of thing where beat 1 is missing because there's harmonic information and bass information that's too important, and so you don't want the bass drum to kind of be taking priority over that. But in your verse, the first verse of Paradise doesn't have any bass line in it, so it's a really nice opportunity to just have that bass drum and the drum part kind of take the lead just for a moment there. So first verse has no bass line, and then first chorus has more bass information, and so that bass drum drops out. So here it is. Notice when the bass drums dropped out, because the arrangement still works, you know, that's the thing. And I'm being a bit cheeky here because I like it. You don't really need a bass drum there, but I just like doing them. So if you start to get greedy, you can always add more bass drums if you've got space and your hands are available at the time. But a lot of the time you can skip that stuff out, and it still creates a really convincing arrangement that kind of gives you all the information that you need. So, just to finish up, because I think we're coming to the end of the time now, and I don't want to keep you for longer than you're planning to be kept. Other sounds you can make. I'm going to run through this list very quickly. So there are endless possibilities, and there are lots of things that you can do to have substitutes for your snare drum. If you want to have something that's less loud and smacky than your snare drum sound, there are quite a lot of things that can really easily substitute for a snare drum. Finger clicks are a great example, as in... So if you can click your fingers, bonus points if you can do both hands, that can be a really, really good thing to substitute in. Other soft snare drum alternatives, you can use your fingers. I use all of them together to tap on the soundboard. That can be really nice for something a little bit more chilled out. You can use the backs of your nails to tap very lightly on the soundboard. I've just written a piece about hermit crabs that features this. You can also knock on the soundboard, and of course all of this stuff also applies to the back of the body. All different spots on the harp are going to have different sounds, and every harp is different, and so are your hands. So you can go to town just exploring all the different sounds that your harp can produce in that way. Different spots on the soundboard give different pitches as the soundboard gets narrow at the top and wider at the bottom. This can be used amazingly for drum fills. I think there was some mention of my Africa arrangement. There's that fill, what is it? Like that. And I always do this where my right hand's travelling down the soundboard, because as you get lower, even though I'm using the same kind of slappy action to do the kind of snare drum sound, the pitch gets lower as you go, so you get that kind of feel of a drum fill. There's also, if you want to check out on my YouTube channel, this year I released a collaborative video with Pia Salvia. And we reverse engineered a cover of Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish. So we did all the parts as they are in the original arrangement, but we did it all with harps, and Pia did the vocal over the top. And so there's quite a lot of close-ups in that video of me doing like tom-tom sounds. So the toms are the drums that kind of sit on top of the bass drum, and they're the ones that sound lower. Each time you go to the next one, they get lower on the drum kit. And so if you use the heel of the palm, or this bit of the palm even, to tap the soundboard, you can get different tones and pitches as well at different points on the soundboard as it gets narrower towards the bottom. If you want to try out other ways that you can reproduce tom sounds and thinking about drum fills in an arrangement. And then you've got textural effects, sweeping your hands up and down the soundboard. You can do this to substitute cymbal wash, which is again something that I tried out in that arrangement of Birds of a Feather with Pia. You can do this to imitate weather or environmental sounds, or to sound like a cabasa. It's that cabasa is a percussion instrument. It's got like beads on a metal cylinder, and you kind of use one hand to turn it and the other hand to kind of hold the beads, and it makes a sort of a shh, shh, shh sound. So you can do stuff like that just by sweeping your hands up and down the soundboard as well. If you have a gloss harp and your harp sounds really like it's honking when you do this, you can actually tape a bit of paper to the body of the harp on this side or the other side, and then that can give you quite a nice kind of shh, shh sound if you want to have those kinds of things. Finger rolls. Really nice if you want to have something that sounds a bit like rain, or have something that sounds like sustaining tension over a period of time. If you want to create some kind of fill or roll or something like that, leading you from one section into another. I could go on, but I feel like maybe I've run out of time, and I need to kind of wrap up so that we can have some questions. So yeah, if there's a few more points on this list, thinking about damping the strings and things like that, but maybe I'll talk about them if we've got time. But perhaps if we have some questions now, if there are any questions anyone has.
Amy, I think we should have titled this one "You Too Can Be Cool." This is great. If anybody has any questions, now is the time to put them in the chat. Yeah, you're getting lots of hearts. That was just so much fun. And I have to say, personally, I am not always good at experimenting, but watching you, I thought, I'm going to try this. Oh, you got lots and lots of love there, Amy. So,
oh, thank you very much for having me.
Yes.
I mean, just while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, I should say, thinking about all the techniques that I use, aside from the ones which I've very specifically said I've borrowed from acoustic guitar, I feel like all the techniques I use are things that I learned from classical players and from my classical training, but I've just adapted them with my listening to pop music to think, how can I use these effects that I already know how to do and bring them into this other context. So from that point of view, there's absolutely no reason why anyone else couldn't do this. Everyone that has got those kinds of even thinking about stuff like etouffee, all of these things come in. It's just thinking about them in a different way, and using your ears and your instincts to kind of go, how can I make this work meaningfully for the harp, and also bring it into this pop context, you know.
Yeah, no, this is great. June wants to know, do you utilize a looper?
Well, yeah, I've thought about it from time to time, but the problem that I have with loopers, and no shade to people that use loopers, because that is an incredible skill that it's a lot easier, it's a lot harder rather than it looks. They make it look easy, people that do it well, but it's not easy. I didn't have access to a decent pickup or to an electroacoustic harp for an extremely long time, and so part of the reason why all my arrangements are purely solo and can be done acoustically is because I couldn't afford to buy a looper. But another reason why I kind of haven't gone down that route is because I really like detail, and I love the fact that in a lot of my favourite pop songs, every single section has something slightly different about it and some slight different detail over the kind of main basis. Say it's the same 4 chords for the entire song, every section will still have some kind of little detail that is unique to that section, and I just love being able to include all the details, and that's always put me off having a looper, because I feel like it limited me to having it be the same every time when I wanted it to be different every time, if that makes sense.
That really does. That really does. A looper is good for those of us that don't have your stamina. Joan, Joan wants to know, what is the make and model of your harp?
Okay. Well, this harp that I'm playing today, this is one of mine, but this is not my main harp. This is my electroacoustic. So I have this is a Line and Healy style 2000, but it's got a really insane paint job. This was spray painted by a Welsh street artist, as far as I understand it, because this harp used to belong to Catherine Finch. And she had this painted for a show that she was doing about space a long time ago. So it's kind of somewhat unrecognisable as a Line and Healy, particularly up close in the picture on Zoom. But most of the time, my main harp that I play is also a Line and Healy, but it's a style 30, my black harp that I usually play. And so that's my mainstay, my main acoustic harp.
How do you notate some of the special effects in your pop arrangements? That is Eileen.
Yes. Well, okay. So actually, this was a point that I had in my notes before I stopped for time purposes. But so my notation system, if you look at any of my scores, the main bulk of what I add in notation it's all borrowed from orchestral drum notation. As when I was a teenager, that was my second study. I did orchestral percussion. I played timpani and a bit of snare drum. I mostly like the tune stuff, but I made myself do a bit of drum rudiments and things like that. So the notation system it's like drum notation, where you've got your round note heads, your regular note heads for bass drums, and your X note heads for snare drums, and sort of various other things as well. So that's the kind of main foundation of it. And then in addition to that, I use the harp system for tails down for left hand, tails up for right hand. So it's a simple premise, but obviously that can also get quite complicated depending on how complicated the score is.
Okay, and so wow, so we had Eileen and Aileen. If I'm saying your names wrong, forgive me. She wants to know, do you get requested to do modern religious music, Christian gospel, and would the same technique work in your arrangements or even in your playing? Do you think you could use that same technique?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. For me now, I mean, I'm retired from playing at weddings now because I played so many for about 10 years, and there's just a lot of other stuff that I want to do now. So I'm not actually taking requests most of the time from other people anymore. I'm kind of just arranging the things that I want to arrange for myself now, which is a great privilege. I did used to arrange quite a lot of hymns for wedding ceremonies here in the UK, but that was usually much more kind of traditional hymns, and it was for accompanying a small congregation at a wedding ceremony. I think the most modern Christian music that I've ever arranged is I think it was a 90s hymn that I used to sing at school called Shine Jesus Shine, but that's about as far as it's gone for me. But yeah, no, there's absolutely no reason why the techniques couldn't apply to modern gospel as well. I bet that would sound awesome, and I hope somebody does it and I can enjoy listening to it.
Oh my gosh, now Shine Jesus Shine will not leave my head.
It's a banger.
Kim wants to know, do you advise learning the piece without percussion first and then adding the percussion once you've learned it versus doing it the same way? So learning the percussion as you do it, or learning the whole song first and then adding the percussion?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think, as with, I remember always being told when I was studying, I remember my teacher saying to me that you should try and learn all the dynamics as you're learning the notes all at the same time. And I totally agree with that. Even though that's an additional layer of mental energy that you're having to put into the memorization or the learning process. So I think in the first instance, if you have a percussion part, it's the kind of thing where you might want to treat it to a certain extent like a third hand, or a third and fourth hands even, and think about learning those bits separately and then gently starting to put them together. But I think if you learned the whole piece and then you tried to add the percussion on top, I think that might be challenging. I'd think of it more maybe as, you know, when you learn a section of a new piece of music and you learn the right hand and the left hand separately and then you try and put them together. It's sort of more of a puzzle of trying to fit in integrating the percussion in at that stage and doing it kind of building block by building block. So you might want to learn the right hand notes by themselves and the right hand percussion by themselves, and then the right hand notes and percussion together, and then do the same thing with the left hand. And then you can start to put the two hands together and coordinate, because the percussion takes an awful lot of coordination. That's one of the biggest challenges that I still find if I'm learning a new thing that I've written with percussion. There's still that impulse, you know, you're trying to play the chords and you're trying to think about which action you're doing on the board and which hand you're doing it with, and there's still that temptation to kind of flail and misfire and get really tense, and you sort of have to really kind of control that impulse. And so doing everything slowly and doing everything very kind of methodically and in stages, I think is the way of dealing with it. So yeah, so I guess that's my answer. You want to integrate it early on, but just do it in a very measured way so that you're trying to make it comfortable, and make sure that you start slow enough that you can really remember what comes next without getting too tense, and building that into your memory of how you play it.
It really fits like in all the ways we're training. So for the last questions, and because I tell you what, we need a part two, you guys, for our last question. So it's going to be twofold, because we have a question: does percussion work for funerals? And
Yeah.
yeah, does percussion work for funerals? I'll let you answer that. And then the very last question, that's hilarious. Does percussion work for funerals?
Yeah, okay, so I think that depends on whose funeral it is, you know. If they loved music that has, you know, that kind of vibe, and they would have loved you drumming on your harp, then absolutely, why not, you know. But that's entirely a case by case basis, isn't it?
It really is. And so, for the best question of the day, someone wants to know about your 3D floral background. It looks so
Ah.
lovely. So, what's going on behind you? And then
Well,
Jay will come back with the trivia.
yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, so I made this myself. My mum helped me. I have to give her credit because it was weeks and weeks of work. Um, so the background that you see, this is my harp studio. I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed that in my house I have a home studio, and this is where I do all my recording, remote sessions, recording my own stuff, filming videos. Everything is done here. And so when I moved here, I was midway through producing all the music videos and doing the final recording for my debut EP, Syzygy, which is they're basically pop songs that I've written for solo harp. And it's a very personal kind of achievement, Syzygy, because it's a big story all about me and some of the struggles that I've had and how I've overcome challenges in my own life, as well as a showcase of all this stuff that I've learned to do and the language of pop that I've kind of absorbed and sort of brought into my solo harp playing. So when I moved here, I decided that this was going to be the setting of the final scene of the final video, because I have 3 music videos for the tunes that I wrote for Syzygy that you can check out on my YouTube channel. And so they're entirely white. They're made of white cardstock, and basically everything that you see behind you, these were all cut out with a Cricut machine, which I bought off eBay. And all of the flowers that you see, flowers and foliage, are all they've all been carefully selected to symbolize different aspects of one of the 3 songs which I wrote for Syzygy, because each song has loads and loads of symbolism which I've kind of attached to it, and the album cover has all these flowers in a sort of a ring around me on the cover, and so there's a sort of a section for each of the songs, and they all have this symbolism, you know. So the ferns that you see here, they represent the first song, Courage, and sort of things about rebirth and starting again and things like that. And then you've got roses, you've got sage, you've got a bird of paradise. Where is it? Up there, bird of paradise. White lotuses, lots of things like that. But they all have this symbolism that ties into the EP. And in the final scene of the final song on the EP, Power, there's a section of the song which is all shot in this room. And so I made all of this for that video shoot. But it's a lovely thing because it took months to put it all together. It's white cardstock that's been cut out and hot glued to a sort of a homemade backing that I've made and sort of hung up on the wall. And it's a living record of the fact that I made the EP and I moved from that sort of part of my life into this new part of my life where I'm doing a lot more composing and playing original music and sharing the stuff that I love doing on the harp with my wonderful community. People just like you.
No, Amy, this is so great. And I love how everything you say, you just talk about how blessed you are. We've been very blessed to have you here and to hear you. I think MJ is going to announce the winners, and then we're thrilled that you're going to play us out. Everybody, please take advantage of the fact that this young lady does private coaching. I think you never know what you can find out about yourself until you spend one-on-one time with people of the caliber that you have access to. Thanks to the hang. Okay, MJ.
And Amy, I just want to say you have so much creativity that extends even beyond what you're doing musically. I was blown away when you were talking about that artistic stuff. So, wow,
Thank
it's
you.
beautiful, beautiful. And we're really grateful that you were here today. So the trivia, actually, within a minute, we got three correct answers. The Wizard by Black Sabbath, I believe, is harmonica, which sometimes they call harp in rock and roll. Oh, we have an addition to the hang. Lovely.
Sorry, I
And
didn't want to interrupt, but he just came in
no,
crying. He's
no.
very
So
needy.
so Katie will explain how they came in and who gets what. But Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine, definitely. And the other two were two that I know, which here is the generational divide. Of course, She's Leaving Home. That was the first one that came to mind. And then the Stevie Wonder that has the Dorothy Ashby solo, If It's Magic. So Katie, you can explain who's getting what. And then Amy, I cannot wait to hear you play us out.
Yeah, so I was watching everything as they came in. We had a couple of answers get deleted and then re-put back in. So all three of those came in at 403. So all of you guys are going to be getting something. So the If It's Magic by Steph E, that was a submission. Florence and the Machine was a submission by Madison, and then Tula answered She's Leaving Home. So all three of you guys will be getting a little something from us. I have your information from your registration, but if you can send me an email just to confirm your mailing address, info@atlantaharpcenter.com.
Great, great, great. So, Amy, and I can't even tell you that our group, we're usually gone by now, but we're all like, no, we got to hear her play. So, Amy, we thank you again, and we look forward to whatever you're giving us now to inspire us to hit these harps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for having me. It's been really, really lovely to hang out with you all. So I've realised I've got a little note to myself down here. I've already plugged my EP, Syzygy. You can listen to that on Spotify and all other streaming platforms. It's also on Bandcamp if you want to support me directly. Or you can buy it on CD if you're ancient and millennial like me. I also have original sheet music CDs and classical arrangements that you can buy on my store, Amy Turk Harp/store. And if you want to check out any of my pop arrangements and have a go at those yourself, they're all on musicnotes.com. You can just go to Music Notes and type my name into the search bar and you'll see a big catalogue of all the stuff I have available. And I'm adding new stuff to that all the time, so check back there to see if your favourite songs have been arranged by me. And if they haven't, you can message me through my website, or you can send me a DM on Instagram and hassle me about it, and I'll do my best to make those happen for you. So I'm going to finish by playing a tune, a new tune of mine that I'm going to be playing during my presentation at One Harp World. This is a song which features some finger clicks and some other snare drum substitutes that we talked about earlier. And it's a little tune about encouraging yourself even when you've had a difficult day, to pick yourself up again and try again tomorrow after you've had a rest. So this is the little angel on your shoulder reminding you it's okay to make mistakes and mess up, because you can always try again. So this song is called Spirit. Now I'm taking my headphones off so I can hear myself playing. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been really, really lovely time hanging out with you all. Thank you for your lovely questions, and have an amazing rest of your day.
Beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We still don't want to leave. Look at us.